Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you, Carly, for the introduction and getting us started. I'm looking down this group of folks, and for the most part, I see recognizable Affinity Group member names. I would say, firstly, hey, we made it. We made it to Friday, and this is great. And I thank you for kind of ending your week with us. And of course, this is our concluding Affinity Group meeting for this school year or this academic year. And so thank you. Thank you for your participation. And we're going to walk you through a number of things here today. But as I sort of comment about that, I would just simply ask you, as is usual and customary, that you introduce yourself in chat, your first name, last name, your organization, and your role. And if you are new to this group, if you have not participated here before, tell us about that. Just kind of indicate, hi, I'm new. We'll sort of have that understanding and make sure that we take some historical stuff and maybe help provide perspective for you, so that you can get the most out of this meeting as possible. So thank you for introducing yourselves. Right now, we've got an ambitious undertaking. I see that Jana, one of our speakers, is in the space. That's always we've got her here, which is fantastic. I'm not sure about Katie, her sidekick. We'll learn more about that in a bit. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Leslie, who is a co-facilitator, as you all know, and we'll get right to it. So take it away, Leslie.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Happy spring, we think, in Minnesota. Excuse me. Technically it is. Yeah, we've got a great agenda, we believe. And as usual, I always start with some updates between our last meeting and this meeting. And we have been in direct communication, as many of you know, with the system director at Minnesota State for the P20 and Student Success Unit, Anthony Miller. And he's the one charged with the oversight, if you will, for putting together the co-req planning project. And so he's our best bet to talk to about this. And I'm just looking for a minute. If anyone is new, could somebody let me know? Because as I'm talking, I modify what I say just a little bit to fill people in. Russ, neither of us introduced ourselves, but I always do like to say that I retired from working at the System Office of Minnesota State in their Educational Innovations Unit. And then I also taught at Metro State for 24.5 years. I'm still adjuncting on a call as needed basis. So understanding the faculty mindset within Minnesota State, as well as the systems, about how things get escalated up through governance processes and working with unions, is something that I fully understand. So what happened with the co-req phase is, or the management of the project phases, they're still in phase one. We reported last time that the work group recommendations went to the steering committee, and they were forwarded to the Academic Affairs Council, which was the next level up. Then that was forwarded to the Minnesota State Coordinating Commission. That's sort of the directors of all the different councils that exist within Minnesota State. And they sort of align everything to make sure that nobody's siloed off and doing something that other folks don't know about. And after that, it'll go all the way up to the senior vice chancellor. And so what Tone Anthony said is they really don't know when phase one will be completed. He's hoping maybe that the recommendations can be forwarded to the campuses by this summer. So we'll see if it's this summer or fall. I'll show you on a following slide what the phases look like. And he's predicting, or we're predicting based on where they're at, that they might be 1 to 2 semesters off of where they thought they would be. So, the steering committee, this is regarding professional development for faculty who would be very new to working with, who would have formerly been dev ed students or students with maybe lower skill levels than they might be used to working with. So we asked Anthony for an update on the co-req professional development, what they're doing, what they're thinking. Do they have anything in the works already? And they do, and that's why we have a couple of speakers here today, and I'll mention them in a minute and why they're here. But the steering committee is finalizing a professional development plan for the overall project. I thought that there were 2 co-req courses right now, or 2 courses being offered as faculty development for those faculty who are either presently or will be teaching co-req courses. But we learned yesterday there's actually been a series of 5 courses. I think our speakers will address that. But in any case, those courses have all been supported through a grant for the Math Pathways. And for those of you who have been part of the Affinity Group for several years, we brought one of the speakers, Katie. And I don't know if she says her last name Smyger or Smaja. So Katie or Jana, if you're here, maybe you can let us know when we introduce you, okay? Or put the phonetic spelling into the chat. In any case, Katie presented a couple years ago all about the Math Pathways program, and that was sort of an early iteration of co-req, getting students into college-ready math courses or college credit-bearing math courses right from the get-go. You know, they don't know about, this is what Anthony said, they're unsure about funds and stipends available for faculty to enroll in these courses for faculty development going forward. And you will hear more about that from Jana and Katie. But he said the goal is to continue to work with the unit that is sort of hosting and sponsoring these courses. And that unit is called NED, which is the Network for Educational Development. Before I retired, I mean, I sat here and literally they were sitting right next to me. I was heavily involved in some of the early planning efforts for NED regarding teaching with technology at the time and best practices for, online and hybrid teaching. So here's the implementation plan. I've shown this now. I think we've shown this for ever since it existed, at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And you can see that there's no known completion date for phase 1 other than they're hoping for as soon as possible. So that's that. As far as we know, they're still looking at somewhere around fall 27 or spring of 28. Maybe it would be delayed by another semester or so for full implementation. Okay, so there are a couple more pieces to this update. The Affinity Group members have always been interested in placement activities within Min-State because of the issues with guided self-placement, and whether or not students who would enroll in these courses are going to be able to pass, especially those with some of the lower, as I said, lower skill level. So we reported last time, not last month, that the Minnesota legislature had called for a review of the Minnesota State's practices for course placement. And what we learned from Anthony this time is that actually there's a conduit for this external review of the practices. So OHE, which is the Office of Higher Ed, they were the ones charged with putting recommendations forward or doing the study. So they hired an external consultant to actually do the study, interviews, whatever, data analysis, whatever they needed to do, and work with Min-State. And the purpose, as we mentioned in a prior meeting, was to encompass all the issues that students may encounter once they're placed And to answer the question, it was very broad in scope. What impact, including possibly negative impacts, are the practices having on students? What Anthony said is that there's no update yet, there's no conclusion. And the report was scheduled to go to the legislative committees this season, right now, as of February, but the House was late. As you know, there was this whole debacle about getting the co-chairs in place, and so there's a backlog of the House looking at their various bills and issues. He said that nothing in the study that he's aware of has been made available to anyone within Minnesota State. He said, oh, he is not releasing anything. Even he and the P20 unit don't know what will be presented to the legislature. As soon as it is presented, that's when it becomes public. And then the last piece on placement, he said, it's sort of an unfortunate confluence of activities happening simultaneously, I guess, is that their own committee, which is the Minnesota State's committee, the assessment for course placement, did do a fair amount of work on modifying policies for placement last year. But when this legislative request came up, they decided to withhold putting those recommendations out to campuses for change because they don't know what's going to come up with this, and to try to ask campuses to change their practices on placement couple different times in a row, and they might counteract each other, he said, was really futile. So those are my words. He said, so they're really not doing anything. They're waiting until they see what comes out of the legislature. So at this point, we have 5 minutes, basically. I'd like to see if there's anyone here who is on the Minnesota State Steering Committee or any of the faculty work groups, and to see if they have anything else to share that wasn't included in my update. So I don't know if there is anyone here. I haven't looked at the participant list. Usually it's folks like Matt Dempsey or Jan May is not here, I don't think. Anyone? Does anyone have anything or any questions you have about the update? Okay, quiet group. Well, we have so far, we have an interesting next segment, and that may well generate more conversation. So I'll keep moving here, and but let me just pull up the participant. Is Katie here?
Yes,
Okay. And did you put in the chat, Katie, how you say it? Well, I'll let
she
you say
does.
your last.
She did.
Okay, well, I've got to give me 1 second so I get it right. Smeya, you don't, okay. Learned
All
something
right.
new today. Good. So yeah, I mentioned this NED group before, the Network for Educational Development. Their outer facing website is public. If anyone wants to go on to look, you just Google NED and Minnesota State University, or to be honest, I still put in MNSCU, MINSCU, because it still will pull up, and then I add NED to it. And you can find their course offerings. But this year, if I move to the next slide, we learned of 2 courses basically that were being offered by or through the Math Pathways grant. And the first course was called Short Course Math Pathways plus co-req. It was offered the first part of the semester. And if you notice what's in bold, it says the short course is intended for mathematics and stats faculty who will be designing and offering co-req support courses on their campuses for the first time. So it will emphasize the details of bringing co-req courses from an idea to full-scale implementation. So we learned about that, and you can read some of the objectives here, defining the models of the co-req support courses and so forth, and strategizing how to align support curricular changes with the broader campus community. And then the second course we saw in NED was a formula for teaching math co-requisites, and that was designed for educators seeking to enhance their teaching strategies for the math co-req courses. So I went to the NED unit and said, can you help me out and patch us up with those faculty members who might be offering these courses? And that led us to Katie and to Jana. And at this point, what I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about what we asked them to speak about during their presentation. So I'll come back to this slide in a minute. We asked them, because they've been supporting faculty in math pathways through this grant for a couple years now. But the question was, what has been added to these courses now that faculty are hungry for and wanting to enroll in these courses specifically designed for co-req format? And what questions did they hear or receive the most from participants? What were they most eager to know? A lot of these faculty, as you know, are going to be teaching this population of students for the first time. And so we wanted to know what seemed to be their greatest need for professional development. And then we were asking them if they anticipated being involved in any of the PD efforts in the future for faculty within the co-req environment, or if they knew anything more about what the system is doing. And I know that they're prepared to address that. So without further ado, as they always say, let me introduce Jana Anderson, math faculty at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. And I should take that possibly off, she is here today. Katie Smeya, math department at St. Cloud Technical and Community College. And having worked in the system, I definitely had been to both campuses and have some colleagues there. So it's nice to welcome these two today. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to you.
So much, and thanks for having us today. All right. Yes, so Jana and I have been working with the Math Pathways project, and that has had professional development throughout the life of the project as we've developed co-requisites at many campuses in math throughout the last 3 years. So over these last 3 years, the professional development has focused on the structural change to co-requisites. So making co-requisite courses, adjusting what your course flow would be, that involves course placement, it involves advising, it's a whole kind of campus thing. So making the change so that your course offerings now have co-requisites in place of prerequisites. And so a lot of the things that we've had with our partnership with the Dana Center have been curriculum development, so back mapping or using backward design to create the courses so that they include just the content that is needed to support students and success in the college level class. Broad stakeholder engagement, working with advising teams, registration teams, our partner disciplines, because changing to the co-requisite structure has implications across the college, and it's really important for all stakeholders to be involved and have common messaging and understand how co-requisites benefit students and support the college mission. We've also worked on continuous improvement involving institutional research, collecting data, the kinds of data we should be looking at, how to use those data to make decisions, what kind of things to look for, how it compares to national data. And so through this, we've collected local and system data that is showing really great results. And then we always knew that at some point there would be, like when we were focusing on the structural change, there was going to be a time where these co-requisites are now the way we teach, and that would involve classroom pedagogy changes. So thinking about what actually happens in the co-requisite classroom and some of the differences. We've done a little bit of that throughout the structure of the grant, but most of the professional development we've offered over the last 3 years has been about making the structural whole campus change, knowing that in kind of the stage we're in right now and in the future was where some of the pedagogy and classroom practices would need to be impacted.
So then after the 3 years where the a lot of the support was provided by the Dana Center along with us. We're kind of phasing out of that now, but we wanted to make sure that there was an avenue for some of this work that we've been doing and some of the great resources that we've had to live on. Katie mentioned that we were in teams, in faculty and teams throughout our campus with advisors, admin, faculty, but we know that not everybody was in that, right? So it was just some people that were getting this information, and we wanted to have a way where this information could live on. So we turned to partnering with NED to create some of these professional development opportunities for our faculty around the system so that some of this could live on. We wanted to make it available more widely. We wanted to make sure that people that weren't in our grant right away had the capacity to then take some of these courses and provide support to faculty all through the stages of implementation. So how is teaching a co-requisite different? We know that co-requisite classes have a different feel. I know that before, when I used to teach my college level classes, those prerequisite courses served as a gatekeeper to keep certain students out of our college level courses, and now we have all of those students in the class at once. So we needed to address with our professional development, address how we could support these students by bringing in some holistic support. We also know that alignment to the college course is key. For example, in my stats course, when I'm teaching regression, it's tempting for me in my co-req to just go in and pluck out my lines unit from my introductory algebra course and put it into the co-requisite. And what we found is that it's much better for students if we can more closely align those things. They don't need to know all about how I would teach slope in an introductory algebra course. They need to have it connected to what they're doing in stats today or in stats tomorrow. So using that backwards design component has allowed us to address some of those issues, also to identify common challenges. Another thing that I do in my class quite a bit is talking about learning from mistakes. How do you make a good mistake? So many students that come through our co-requisite courses are a little bit traumatized by math in their past. They have been beaten down a little bit by math, and they need to understand and we need to help them learn how to make mistakes and how to learn from them, how to use good mistakes in the classroom to help them learn. I also do a lot, Katie has preview and review. I call it look a little bit ahead and a little bit back. So we do a little bit of reviewing in that co-requisite course, and we also look ahead and preview. So then once we get to it in the college level course, then those students have a little bit of that background and they feel more prepared and they become leaders in the classroom. Scaffolding is something that my English colleague talks a lot about. When they're writing papers, they will not just give the assignment for the paper, they will scaffold up to write that end product of writing a paper. And so her co-requisite focuses a lot on that scaffolded content towards the college level content. One thing that we hear a lot from advisors especially is, I'm really scared to put someone in more math when they already like math, but they already don't like math or they already struggle with math. So they'll say, you know, they're already in that 3-credit college level math. Adding on a 2-credit just seems cruel because we're giving them more math. And so we want to talk with instructors about how to make that co-requisite experience really be a support and not just more unrelated math. So that is a big message that we try to give to people who are teaching that co-req the first time. Also, they might consider some of the aspects of their class like homework, grading, testing, how all those might be different in a co-requisite class than they are maybe used to teaching a prereq. So with all that in mind, we, through our grant, created some opportunities through NED to kind of deal with some of these issues that I was talking about. These are the courses that are currently running right now. We took a bunch of our faculty members who had been very active in the grant, our high flyers, we sometimes call them, and these faculty were able to create these courses for us. So these are courses created by faculty for faculty. We have a Grading for Equity book club, which looks at the Grading for Equity book. It also talks about some of those changes in how to make some of your practices more equitable in grading. So there's the book club. Then we have 2 short courses. Those were the 2 that Leslie was talking about, the Formula for Teaching Math Co-reqs and Creating Math Co-requisites from the Ground Up. One is centered more at people who are teaching, who are right involved in teaching the co-reqs and some of those things that students might benefit from. And then the other one is for people who are just starting their co-req journey and are creating their co-req for the first time, and things that they should take into account. The other 2 opportunities for faculty at this time are the learning communities. We have one that is for instructors teaching statistics and one for college algebra. These have been very active. The instructors seem to really crave that collaboration with other math teachers that are doing the same thing and trying to make improvements to their courses for their students. So those are the 5 things that are being offered right now. Katie and I oversaw the creation of these, but there are other faculty that are currently facilitating them right now. Then, because of feedback from faculty, we also have 3 other offerings that are currently being developed. It's in the works right now. One is supporting students beyond the math, non-cognitive supports. One is a quantitative reasoning learning community, similar to the other 2 learning communities, but focusing on those students or those teachers who are teaching the quantitative reasoning, and then supporting reading in the math classroom. And these were areas that faculty have come to us and asked about. So from that, another thing that Leslie asked us to talk a little bit about was what have you seen from faculty? What are they wanting to know? And so we did a quick survey of the faculty that are teaching our co-requisite NED learning opportunities right now, and kind of came up with a list based on that and based on what we've heard from faculty throughout the grant. One that I know is very near and dear to a lot of your hearts is the non-cognitive supports, success skills. The Dana Center has a nice resource about connecting to support resources. But then within the learning communities, I just went in and picked out a few, and it's so neat to see how those teachers are sharing with each other different things that they are using in their own classrooms, like targeted intervention for students who are not doing well, embedded tutoring in the classroom, weekly student success strategies, test anxiety, how to deal with mistakes, procrastination, starting and staying strong. All of these things are coming out of that learning community, and that's something that our faculty seem to be craving is more of that learning. Equitable procedures and practices, which is why we did the Grading for Equity book club, and teachers are looking at redesigning some of their assessments, some of their practices in their classrooms to better deal with where their students are right now. Active learning, what to do in class. What should I do in my class? Their regular class might have more of a lecture feel, but how can we make that co-requisite more interactive with the students so that the students are doing things and figuring out where they're having problems? I also like to add in, one of my big things is responding to student feedback. right? Asking students what they need and then designing things that fit where they are right then. Faculty often also ask about textbooks, technology, OER. Where can I get the best materials for my co-req? We've noticed that as co-reqs have become more of the norm nationally, that some textbook companies are beginning to make co-requisite texts, and some are good and some are not. Some you can tell they've just gone to their beginning algebra textbook and picked up chunks of material and plopped it into their co-req. That it's sort of aligned, but it's not the best. So that leaves faculty with a lot of making their own materials or using things that they find, which is another reason that those learning communities are so helpful, because they can really rely on each other and share with each other things that they're doing. Supporting students with reading in the math classroom is one that we hear a lot as well, which is why we are looking at putting together that short course that will be to come. And what we hear over and over and over, this is the biggest one, is that faculty really yearn for that opportunity to collaborate with each other across the system, right? Like I know myself, I'm at a small campus with only one other math teacher who doesn't teach the co-reqs. So I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to. So having these learning communities and these groups really fill a need and we hear that over and over and over in all of our evaluations from faculty. So those are kind of our top things that we hear from faculty. And I'll turn it over to Katie to talk kind of about the next phase a little bit.
And so you heard from Leslie about how this is moved beyond our project and into the Minnesota State developmental ed reform. So English, reading, and math are all going to be engaging in co-requisite design in the areas that haven't been already. As part of that, the Developmental Education Steering Committee has created a professional development plan with anticipated needs. So they looked at what our project has done for Math Pathways, and they identified the parts of that that have been impactful, any other areas that they want to include as reading, English, and the remaining math areas convert to co-requisites. So that is, there's a plan that has been drafted, and now the next stage is for that to be turned into a calendar of events and what kinds of things will happen, where they will be offered. Will they be, there will be some of the structural things and like whole group, like kinds of opportunities like like I told you about earlier that the Dana Center helped us with. And then there may also be offerings similar to the ones that we've developed at the end of our project. So those will all be developed now in the coming months and year for implementation across the system. So yeah, we are happy to answer any questions that you have on any of these professional development opportunities. We don't know a ton about what comes next, just because that will be, that has yet to be determined, but I'm happy to answer any questions if that's helpful.
Russ, I know you may have one. First of all, thank you both. We really appreciate, it feels like you're being collaborative with this. What I didn't do at the beginning, Jana heard this yesterday, is to talk about the membership of the Affinity Group here, which is we like to have, a combination from both Minnesota State and adult education. It tends to lean more heavily towards ABE because I think this is the group that is always interested in seeing how the partnerships between the two can benefit this group of students. I mean, we're all in it to help students succeed, especially those most at risk. And so one of the questions that has been coming up from this group persistently is, okay, we understand this co-req model, but some of the students that they get, we see all the time, they'll say don't even have a fourth grade, math level, or their reading skills are very low. So we could imagine in a co-req that those may be in the center or marginally who otherwise might not have passed could be sort of buoyed up and pass. But what about those with the lowest level skills, and how are you helping faculty who've never dealt with this population teach to those. Now, as a former faculty developer myself, I understand scaffolding. I don't know if everyone here does. They may well. Scaffolding and active learning. Those are strategies used for all faculty to a certain degree. I'm not trying to put them down at all. They're really effective. But what about that level of those that need the most help? And that's where the additional skills, the soft skills, support skills, is really the strength of adult education. And so this is a two-part question. How do you deal with that? And are you working with any faculty who already have partnerships with adult ed? And how are they factoring into the mix of helping these students? So that's a complex question, but I hope it gets to the core of what people are hoping to hear, I think, if I've done that. And please add in the chat. And Russ has something to add. Feel free, go for it.
Yeah, no, it's just as we do this discussion piece, please, if you're comfortable doing so, come on screen. We're just having a conversation in the space. So, you know, light up your video cameras and let's just chat in the room. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll respond. Well, Katie's unmuted too, but I'll respond a little bit about dealing with those lowest level students that come in with the lowest ability level. Boy, it's tough, right? If anybody has the magic bullet, we're looking for it, right? But we know it doesn't work, right? We know that sending them back through multiple levels of prerequisite courses in order to make them earn their way to the college level class just doesn't produce results. It's very dismal, the percentages of students who then go on to get their college level credential. So it's hard. We do rely on the strengths of some of our ABE partnerships, embedded tutoring, to help ease that transition a little bit. But I think that you'll hear this conversation more and more and more about what's the best way. And honestly, I don't think we have a lot of great answers for that. But we do know what doesn't work is that long prerequisite path. I don't know if Katie, if you have more to add.
Yeah, I was going to say, you asked about working with campuses that do have some of these partnerships. A couple that I know of, I know Lake Superior College has a strong relationship on their campus up in Duluth. I know Anoka Ramsey has some really strong partnerships over in like Coon Rapids, Cambridge area. So, and they have done things with like team teaching and partnering and all kinds of really innovative strategies for supporting students. They present a lot at our conferences and we've learned a lot from them. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us to start developing more of those partnerships. Like we are craving that on my campus. We just haven't, because of the way ABE funding is like legs that year, it's been so hard to get it started, right? But so that's something that we are interested in. I know many other campuses are like, how do I get that? And so a really good opportunity for collaboration and innovation so we can figure that out, because it really does enhance the experience for all students when it can be this nice, cohesive, coordinated, holistic plan to support students.
Katie, will you respond to the question in the chat about the professional development opportunities being open to adult education teachers?
Sure.
Yes.
So so all of the things that will be, I would imagine that my expectation is that moving forward with the developmental education redesign in English, reading and math, that it will operate in a similar like campus team kind of way, right? Campuses will form teams. We really are going to hope and encourage folks we want folks to bring their ABE partners into those campus teams, right? So like if you are not already involved in this, like talk to your campus and say, how do I get involved in your co-requisite work going forward? Like we want to be on the team. We want to be part of that. And so if we will encourage them to reach out to ABE folks, but if ABE folks also reach out to Minnesota State, that just can help facilitate that as well. So when we do how do we make these? All the things that Minnesota State campus teams, all partners are welcome to those. For NED, I don't know all of the rules on what NED was. The reason why the funding for, we paid participants this spring for participation, and we can only, just because of our contract and the way we can only pay Minnesota State employees stipends. And so that's why they were limited to the math faculty this last spring. We couldn't pay even like college and the schools teachers who are teaching Minnesota State classes. We can't even pay them because they aren't our employees. So it's more about, because we couldn't pay them a stipend, we just don't have a way to do that. But would love to explore that. I guess I don't know. I can't speak for Net and who's their
Yeah.
course for.
I think I can add a little bit again. Well, really it's set up just for Minnesota State folks, and especially because a lot of the content goes into protected websites where you need a star ID, their own login and authentication. I don't believe that anyone
D12.
externally would be invited to these courses. That doesn't mean that Russ and I, through our conversations with Anthony, we're continuing to try to advocate for more and more partnerships, whatever that would look like. The question comes down to funding, who would do it. But Russ, I think we can take that to Anthony if there's a strong appetite for it from this group.
Yeah, no doubt. We would be willing to do that. Yeah. I just, I guess the question I asked yesterday is sort of kind of paramount to this relationship somewhat and the success of students. And, one thing that a partnership offers with adult education is this ability to assess students with some tools, the TABE or the CASAS or some other sort of assessment that really gets at where that student is at and assigns a sort of a grade level to them. And then, of course, based on that, you have this ability then to more precisely engineer or differentiate the instruction for students that are all over the place, frankly, in these courses, right? And so short of that, I just sort of, I'm challenged to think about, how do you do that? How do you really uncover where students are at as they enter the door, as they come to the space? And Jana, you hit it on the head. There's a lot of drama that comes through that door. And especially in the math area, right? And so to be able to help a co-requisite teacher or faculty member who frankly are the desired teacher now for this, because they know the content, right? And this is credit bearing. So the key there is, how do you help that person be able to differentiate instruction? How do you help them to really utilize the tools and the resources available to on a pedagogical sense, et cetera, to actually have success moving them up? And to be frank, moving them up at certain levels within a semester is, that's a tall task. It might take several semesters, right? And strategies and support. So if the two of you could speak to that a bit, because I know, Jenna, yesterday you spoke to kind of your style, which is formative, evaluation information and adjusting. Certainly is one way. But this effective sort of practices that we're trying to emulate or try to get people to replicate within this system where they have a lot of autonomy, there's challenges, right? So So help us, I said a lot, but if you could sort of speak to that, I think it would be great.
There was a lot there.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like taking off my system hat and putting on my teacher hat. Like I
Yes,
just
please.
want to tell you like what it looks like in my classroom. And I've been doing co-reqs in the classroom for 5 years now.
Yes.
And I love my co-req. My students love my co-req. My embedded tutor loves the co-req. It just has creating the community feel in the classroom is a big part of it for me. Asking students for their feedback and then making changes in my course activities because of it has been huge, right? Like I will ask them, okay, here, like right now, I talked yesterday, we're starting on hypothesis testing so that they have these big, long problems that we've now scaffolded. But I say, okay, what part is messing you up? What part don't you get? And so they tell me, and then I make up an activity a lot of times on the fly that addresses exactly what they need in that point. And so listening to my students has been my number one thing. You talked about assessing people with outside tests to see what grade level they're at. I can very quickly assess who's where, right?
Right.
By asking them and by seeing their work, by me not lecturing, right? By me having them do stuff, and then I walk around, and then sometimes we'll split. And with my embedded tutor, I'll say, okay, this half is going to work on this skill, and this half is going to work on this skill. You pick your spot, okay? Or we'll do some of those types of things in the classroom. And so I think just being open, letting go of that control of I have to always be up in the front, picking what the students should know and telling them what they should know, and instead kind of following their lead. What are they needing? And so those are things that have been, it's been so fun too to see those same students who were the ones that would have never talked during class ever in their lives. Now in the college level, they become leaders in our classes. And I've seen it over and over and over, semester after semester, this taking place. And it's kind of a cool thing to see. So I don't know if that answered all of your question, and
Oh, it
maybe
does. It certainly
has
does.
stuff to add to, but I just go for that all around feel. And then the step beyond that now is sharing that with my colleagues from around the system and having the space to be able to go and talk with my colleagues about that. I think is the next step in that.
Yeah,
I'll
you
add,
hit it on. Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I'll
That'd
add
be
a
great.
quick little something to that. Two things. One, it has been really helpful at the places that have ABE partnerships so that we can get more diagnostic information, right? And that way, as the system moves forward in decisions and campuses make their structures, they can say, well, co-reqs are working really well for students, or the students that are having trouble, or the third grade level students, or that, right? So that they have more information about the students. But one thing that I've been really surprised about as I've been teaching co-requisites is how little of students' challenges is actually math, like prerequisite math content. So like, I don't know, because this has always been my biggest thing too, like, but you can't do co-reqs because what about the student who are, really have these highest needs? And what I keep finding with my students is that it's not that they needed 5 years of math content in there. They just need this piece of it. And I, as a critic before, I thought, yeah, but you're giving them a Band-Aid. You're not really helping them understand if you're just doing it. But it just so isn't. Like, I'm teaching a math for teachers class. We do number theory proofs, which is like not in really any other class. But they were like, proofs, these are so hard and whatever. And so, but in the co-req, I said, well, tell me which part was hard. It wasn't the proofs. It was how do I make this expression look like this expression? Oh, okay. So we made up some, like Jana said, if that's what you need, I gave them some like that. We did that part, and they're like, oh, well, now I can do this. It wasn't that they needed, to fill in 5 years of gaps. They aren't deficient. They can do it. They just needed help with the part that was hard, right? And so I think when we see like students may come with gaps, but that doesn't mean that they can't or won't be successful in college level things if we can support them with the right parts, with the parts that are important. I see 3 questions I want to make sure we answer in the chat. So one says, do either of your campus still offer Dev Ed courses in addition to the co-req? At SCTCC, we currently do. We have a course called Math Literacy. It's what I keep calling like our ABE level math. We don't have an ABE partnership just because of funding. Would love one, but currently don't. So we teach those students, SCTCC faculty teach them. And so that's for students who are, when we first made our design, we're concerned about those students being ready to go into co-requisites. We are in conversations about whether or not we think that's the right thing to do. Those students have a hard time moving on. And so we've been considering putting them directly into co-requisites, like and just supporting them in the co-req. So we currently do. We also have a beginning algebra course that is just for students in the algebra pathway who are below the level that we put on our intermediate algebra course. It's another conversation we're having about, is this the right thing to do? There's research that suggests maybe we should be just putting them into the co-req. So we currently have those, like for students below co-reqs. We have no co-reqs as an alternative to co-reqs. Does that make sense? So like once you're at like if you're in a co-req level for stats, that's the only way that you get supported in stats on my campus. And Jen, on your campus, no standalone? Nope. Okay. Trained volunteers, that has never even entered my mind. That's a really good idea. If you have, if this is something you do, share this with your Minnesota State partner and us. Tell us how you do this, because we would love to have more people, trained folks in our classrooms to support this. How is a co-req reflect? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Signet. I'm the one who put the question in because I teach ABE, and so it was just like a decision that Minnesota ABE made, I think about 10 years ago, maybe longer. And a lot of the training for the volunteers is done through Literacy Minnesota, but it's not just literacy. And also like the Hub Center, it's granted it's a bigger program. So there is one of the staff members, a big part of her job is recruiting and getting volunteers trained. And it makes a huge difference because they can work with students who need extra support. I am teaching online, and my volunteers can meet with students in breakout rooms. For example, so I have a student, on my Tuesday volunteer, when students have writing assignments, she can meet with them one-on-one and give them feedback. Then I can go in later and look at what they've done. They just even help me with the technology, but it's even better when you're in person. And like one of you mentioned, you walk around. Well, if you have a volunteer, then there are 2 of you walking around as students are working or meeting in groups. So I don't have an answer, but things have been put in place in ABE. At least the program where I work at the Hub Center. You might want to even reach out to Renata Rumas, who's director, and Ruth Rodriguez is like volunteer coordinator. It really is a huge difference. And so that might be possibly, and maybe even that's something that alumni might be interested in doing. So just a thought.
Thanks for sharing that. The next question is about how is a co-req reflected in what the student has to pay for? Is the class longer? Are there more credits? Is the cost higher for the learner? Co-requisites are structured as they look like a developmental course in the student's schedule and in registration. So they are credits. They're 2 or 3 credits depending on the course and the campus. And so students do pay for them. When you register for co-req, you're not allowed to take it on its own. You take it with so like Jana's stats is 3, and then there's the 2 credit co-req, or we have a 3 credit college algebra and then a 3 credit co-req with it. And so students register for that full package of courses together.
So I'm sorry, Katie, could I ask a follow-up to that? So how does that look? There's each field or pathway a student goes into, they have that, these are the credits, the amount of credits you need to take. What I'm trying to determine is like developmental education, those credits did not a lot of times go towards what they needed. This then impacted their financial aid. Are these co-reqs built in such a way that the credits go towards the pathways they're going to graduate in?
So they're developmental, so they don't count toward their like 60 credits for an AA degree or their 120 credits for a bachelor's degree. So they students can use financial aid. There is a limit on how many credits, developmental credits students can get aid for. But the reducing down to co-requisites actually should really help with that for students being able to use their aid, because there won't be these long sequences and long, like, huge sets of courses that, so students will be less likely maybe to hit that. So yeah,
Okay.
so they won't, go ahead. Yeah. Does that
So,
answer?
so in a nutshell, then they're like developmental education courses, but they benefit because there's not dev ed upon dev ed upon dev ed. Okay,
Yes.
all right,
Yes.
okay.
A reduction of credits in most cases, and for sure a reduction in time.
Okay.
And an increase in effectiveness. So yeah, win, win,
Okay,
win.
yep.
When
Yeah, thank you.
our advisors at Fond du Lac, when we changed over to the co-req model, they were very excited because they got to tell students, you're getting more for your money, because you are getting, you don't have to go through and take a 3-credit course that's not really going to count towards graduation, and then maybe another one, and then you get to your college level a few semesters later. You get to get right into that college level. You're having 2 credits, 2 developmental credits, but it's going to support you and help you. And so they really were excited at our campus. I know that's not the case everywhere, but they were really excited to bring this to students as a good deal for them. So just wanted to add that.
I don't know if there are any others. Oh, there is one.
If we have time,
But,
I'll
you know,
answer it. But
I have a question. You know, we've chosen to go longer with this because there's such good conversation. So I hope that's okay with everyone. I have a question, but maybe there's another one. Signa, was your question about even if a student, was that answered? I'm sorry. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so, because I'm just wondering if it's
Yeah, go ahead.
recommended that a
Yeah,
student
go
take
ahead and
a-
then I'll ask my question
Okay,
after.
sorry. Oh, the problems of Zoom. I just feel like I use all social skills. So if it's recommended that a student take a co-req, can they be forced to take them? Do they have to take them? What happens if they don't take them? We still have some developmental education courses, and a psychology teacher reached out to me in a panic because a student had turned in an assignment she couldn't understand, and I met with the student, and her skills were so far below the college level. So what are campuses doing? Do they force students to take those co-reqs or not?
So co-requisites can be required through the course placement process. You heard from Leslie at the beginning that that's kind of in flux and kind of paused for now while we wait for some key decisions to be made elsewhere at the legislature and at the system office. So so right now, there are many campuses that have some like guided self-placement going on and some things like that. In those cases, students have the ultimate choice on whether they take them or not. My campus doesn't currently have guided self-placement, and so we do have this is what places you into the college level. If you don't meet those criteria, then you must be in the co-requisite to be in there. So through course placement, a campus can require a co-requisite for students below us who don't have certain measures. And that is kind of the recommended or default way to do it nationally, where like students should default into the co-requisites and be required to take them unless there's evidence that they do not need to have them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm open. I'd like to point out that we've asked them to address faculty development for teaching co-req. And now we're broadening into, well, how is the co-req working throughout the entire system? And I want to thank them for stepping up to try to address that. But bear in mind that all of these recommendations for how the full implementation will work are yet to go out to all the campuses, and campuses will have some opportunity to differentiate their processes. So, thank you for doing some gap answering for the moment, and your experience is highly valued. So appreciate it. So here's my question, because I'm I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask something beyond faculty development, which is in hearing the question about, well, have you thought about volunteers and all the skills that ABE folks bring to the table and partnering? To a certain degree, we're hearing the same answer that we heard when ABE folks were partnering on DevEd, which is the individual ABE, either instructor or manager for the region, should work with their partnering college. Russ and I have always had a desire to get into Minnesota State more at the dean level or the administrator level, who's responsible for putting together these pivot teams or co-req teams, right? And seeing if they understand the value of ABE. In the past, we were successful at making a very short presentation at one of the dean's meetings. It's deans, administrators, it's a lot of those folks. We also presented at one of the ASA conferences, I believe. But is there anything else you can see that we ought to be doing, funding provided to help bring the notion of these partnerships and the skills they can bring for all of everything that's been said about working with the students and, gaining more confidence in how to register for courses, how to address a busy life and yet do their study skills. I mean, is there anything else you can see that we ought to be doing within Minnesota State that we're missing?
So speaking from Katie, not Math Pathways, not Minnesota State, but speaking from Katie,
right,
I would say, I see every time ABE is brought up from it's always in how do we get this, right? Like people see the value and want this on their campuses, in their partnerships, in their, this is, every presentation I've been to, people, and how do I get that, right? So from where I'm sitting, the value is well known. The challenge seems to be, how do you pay for it? Because we had someone in our district who said, we'd love to do this. We're going to just eat the cost of the first year, knowing that if we bring in a full-time person, we're good. And then that will have the hours to pay. So it'll be this one-time cost. Well, that person took a new job and then someone else came in and was there's no way we can afford that. And that's fair, right? That's a fair answer, because how are they supposed to just eat the cost for the first year? So if there are ways to identify the startup cost so that it can be sustained, because once you have it, I don't think sustaining it is going to be a problem. There's such a high need there, so many contact hours you can get, right? All of that should work itself out, but figuring out how to get that startup cost so that you can get someone full-time right away, or someone who can, because we had a hard time even finding somebody once we were going to hire part-time, because they wanted to keep it under the hours that get some benefits and keep it where it's in the off the sellers, get all these things it just makes it harder for someone to commit to and then stay and those kinds of things. So I don't think you have a value problem at all.
Yeah.
I think that's well known.
Okay.
Yeah, well, if I could comment, I think there is a startup method, but there's some timing around it. And that startup method is that each year, adult education goes through this transitions work plan development by region throughout so in your region, which is, I think, the mid-central region, Katie, they're right in the process right now of creating a work plan for next year, in which this kind of partnership and some of that startup cost could be paid for. But it would have to be, a situation where you or an administrator would get together with your partners on the adult education side and talk about where would that placement of that adult education teacher occur. And then what some of the, is it a math reading? Is it writing? What is it, right? And so they could then take care of some of the startup costs of paying for that teacher to be in the space. And then you are right, then they're on a path to sustainability. But it's that's one avenue that could get started, but there's some timing around it that makes some sense, and that's usually in the spring toward the June roughly, or May. Julie would know entirely, but where those kinds of things need to be sort of talked about so they can be built into a plan. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't happen after that fact, but it's usually because of a reallocation of dollars where a particular transition project didn't maybe materialize as planned. And so some money goes back into that work plan. And then they're seeking sort of new ideas. And so there are some avenues along the way where it could continue to, it could happen and you could access these money, these startup dollars. Any more on that, Julie? I think I hit that pretty well on the head.
No, and I know Katie has worked on a plan previously.
Yes.
And I'd be more than happy to talk to you, Katie, and bring in the coordinator around that if you're interested. And same with you, Jana. Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
Well, we are, first of all, Katie, Jana, you knocked it out of the park, Thank you. Really, thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for your interest in sharing this information with us. We greatly appreciate it. And we want to continue to talk with you about some of these strategies around how do we help faculty, and in the case of this work, adult education teachers be effective in their work with students with the greatest needs that are ill prepared for the rigors of this coursework. And so stay tuned on that. I think we're at a stage here where we just have a few minutes left to sort of wrap up. I think we will forego updates unless somebody has a burning desire out there to say, here's the latest, the greatest news that I want to share with this group. If you've got that, please let us know quickly. Okay, well, not hearing anything at this moment. Leslie, I think you're going to take us to the wrap up here of today's session.
Sure. Well, again, a big thank you to both of the presenters today. And it was a robust discussion, and I'm hoping that the members of the Affinity Group found it valuable. So, by the way, we really would appreciate you filling out the evaluation form. It's like 5 or 6 questions when it comes to you next week. Even if you don't need the CEU, we love to hear your feedback. We put this slide up at the end of every meeting, just in case you're not aware. There are no new folks here today that we're aware of. So we're not sure that this necessarily is something we think you already know these things, but you're welcome to visit anything, the Affinity Group OneNote site. I want to ask a question. One of our members here today is having trouble getting in. The login should be okay, but she's getting this is to the OneNote site where we put our historical notes and documents and links to the recording. If anyone else is having trouble getting in, I don't know if you want to try it now on your computer for a minute, the tiny URL. I think it's in the chat right now. Please type into the chat if you're having difficult getting in. I have not had difficulty, so we're trying to get to the bottom of it. And with all this being said, and don't forget, we've got thanks to Atlas and the funding provided through MDE and Atlas, we have a web presence on atlasabe.org under key activities for everything related to co-req. And with that, I'll say thank you. Russ can actually bring it on home. We want to say thanks for attending. Have a great summer. And Russ, do you want to talk about what the prospects are for next year?
I do. Before I do that, I'd like to invite Carly to just comment about what you put in chat so that Jana and Katie are aware of this resource as well.
Sure. I pasted some information about the OneNote, but I think you're probably talking about the webinar.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so Amber Dellinger, who works at Anoka Ramsey College and ABE. I think that's maybe who you were talking about, Katie.
Yeah.
You remind me of her. But Amber is the one facilitating this webinar, focused on math and what we call ACES, soft skills, transition, employability skills, and really those supports that you need to be successful in college. And it's on Cinco de Mayo, it's May 5th. It's a webinar in the afternoon, and I'll be there. And just thought that might be of interest to some math folks or some teachers that are on this call.
Thank you, Carly, for that. That's fantastic. And I would just want to let people know that there's some good news that we have to share, and that is that this affinity group work will continue into the next academic year. We've just had a few conversations with Atlas and with the Minnesota Department of Education, the ABE unit. Julie, for instance, that's involved here. And there is a real high desire to continue to have this group meet, to share effective practices, to learn from some expertise like we have in the room today from Minnesota State, Jana and Katie, and others that are involved in this work, so that we can march along together and do the very best we can for these students that are in high need. And Jan, I would just comment that this notion of the past where we know that they just weren't getting to where they need to get. There's a lot of faith that's being sort of placed in the co-req as the solution to that, or part solution to that issue or problem. And yet it is also has many challenges and barriers that are going to make it challenging, a continued challenge to help the target type students to get there. And so anything and everything that we can do together as passionate educators, we need to do. And so we're excited that we're going to have this ability next school year to continue to stay on point with this work together. And so I'm delighted to be able to share that with you. So we have reached the end of our meeting. If you are new or anyone else that would like to just stay after we turn off the recording, we'll continue to talk. And so otherwise, get to your weekend. It's time to relax and enjoy this spring weather that's upon us. So thank you so much for coming.